Every business wants good customer reviews. Every customer wants a good experience. So what happens when both sides click? Or in some cases, when they don't? From Yelp and Entrepreneur Media, this is Behind the Review.
Behind the review, dig deeper too. Behind the review, get all the news. Food, flowers, fixing, make business boom. Behind the review, dig deeper too.
I'm Emily Washcovick, Yelp's small business expert. Behind the Review features conversations with business owners and customers who wrote one of their Yelp reviews. In our discussions, we talk about lessons they've learned that can be used by other businesses to improve their own reviews and their bottom line. This week, I'm sitting down with Adam Goldberg, the founder of PopUp Bagels. You may have heard of this business. They've become pretty famous over the past few years. But they started out modestly in Adam's backyard. We thought you'd enjoy the background and origin story of this local business that was born out of a passion for great bagels during the pandemic and has since become a nationwide sensation with viral cream cheese schmears and celebrity investors. Then, next week, you'll hear us dig in deeper to the PopUp Bagels experience and interview reviewer Amanda R. We'll also dig deeper with Adam and talk about some of the things their business does to curate and engage customers in a way that makes them want to come back and spread the word. Now, here's PopUp Bagels' origin story.
My name is Adam Goldberg. I'm the founder of PopUp Bagels. PopUp Bagels started as a summertime COVID hobby on the fact that it was too hot to make sourdough one day in July back in 2020. Because like everyone else, I was making sourdough in my house and I had all the flours and all the things you needed. And then just one day it just didn't feel right. So my cousin and I decided to make bagels and they were good. And we made them for 2 or 3 days in a row and they were really good. And then on the fourth day, my wife was like tired of the paint falling off the walls and the seeds getting everywhere and all the things that happen when you have no idea what you're doing, but you're just doing something great. And we decided we're going to go to a bagel shop that day instead of making them. And when we got back from the bagel shop, we realized what we had been making was the bagel and the flavor and the texture that we remembered as a child, as opposed to what is more common in stores today. And, you know, not to skip too much, but the whole premise of buying a bag of bagels versus selling sandwiches or cold cuts or salads in our store all goes back to childhood memories of going to the bagel shop, picking up a big oversized bag of bagels, coming home, dumping them out on the table. The whole family's there and you rip into a bagel you want, you put butter, you put cream cheese, whatever it is you're doing. That was all done together. And it's like in anything, like building a business or planning a trip, like the art of the action is almost as fun as the eating. Like planning a trip is almost as fun as going on it. So for us, like when someone goes to a bagel store and orders 12 sandwiches and brings them back and they're all pre-wrapped and he hands them out to the people, you know, that's not as fun as going to the bagel store and coming back with all of the ingredients for everyone to make whatever it is they want. So, you know, we just kind of rolled that out and here we are today.
I love it. I have to know though, like, were you making food before the pandemic? Were you super into cooking?
So the two things I've always loved doing, I've always loved entertaining and I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. I've never been in the food business. I tried for like 2 weeks in 2001. I worked at a Michelin star restaurant and I made it 2 weeks. And that was as an intern. And that was only working like 4 hours a day. And it was like 2 weeks in, I'm like, I'm out. This is not for me. I need to be out in the open. But I love playing acoustic guitar on stage. And, you know, whether it's for 50 people or 500 people, And it's not that I'm very good. It's just I like to entertain and I like to see what I'm doing bring joy to other people. So making bagels was kind of up that alley because people were showing up at my house and I was handing them these warm rings of dough and they were smiling and you could see the kids were getting excited and everyone was getting excited and it just caught on. I mean, I just caught the bug.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about that time of cooking out of the home, people coming to pick it
Yep.
up. Just describe that for people. I mean, I know a lot of food entrepreneurs that were doing that same thing, but it's been 4 years. Some of us forget what that time was like, where you were like running a full business
I don't
on your
forget. I'm
doorstep.
sitting in the room right now with all new cabinets, by the way, now, because we finally earned enough where we could replace all the stuff I damaged while cooking bagels in my house. It was great. For the first 3 months, I didn't charge anyone and I was just hooking up friends and kind of really just having fun with it. It was still COVID and it was still not leaving your house, not going to parties. So for me, having like people show up at my house at 8 o'clock in the morning in the backyard was really kind of cool. I got to see people I didn't really see anymore. And one day, it was my birthday, November 1st, 2020. And I was getting so many people, they were angry. They weren't on my bagel list. And I was like, I don't even know who these people are, some of them. And I said, you know what? I'm going to all 250 of my Instagram followers, which felt like a lot of people at the time, because I was like, I'm just going to announce that for my birthday, all I want to do is make bagels. And I'm going to sell them for $20 for a 6-pack of bagels. And I'm going to cook them in my kitchen. And my daughters and my wife helped. And my dog cleaned up because anything that fell on the floor obviously got cleaned. And we sold like over $1,000 worth of bagels. A food blogger from I think it was CT Bites, she wrote, "Best bagel in Connecticut is in this guy's backyard." And that was it. And after that, I had people saying, how come you're not doing it again next week? And I kept doing it. And I finally looked and I was losing a couple $100 a week just by making bagels for people. So finally, Rachel and Bill Taby, who own a lot of restaurants in the Fairfield County area, they said, Adam, you need to sell these. Stop giving these away. Sell bagels at our kitchen one day. So we borrowed the kitchen of a restaurant they owned. And I was like, I'm going to do this, but it's a lot of work. And I don't really want to wake up at 6 a.m. if no one's going to show up. So I created a website and I called it PopUpBagels.com. And I went on Square, Weebly, and I figured out how to sell bagels in advance on this website. And that was kind of how it all began. And I was like, I'm not going to slice them. We're only selling a 6-pack. And at the time, I think I was selling plain whole wheat, cinnamon raisin. I thought it was so easy to just make all these flavors. Now we only sell one flavor dough. It's either plain sesame, poppy, everything, or salt. And it's all the same dough. But when I started this, I was like, we're making the dough that morning in the kitchen of a restaurant. And that lasted 2 months because the owner of the restaurant's like, my customers are starting to wonder why there's flour on their seats. Because when you're mixing things, and again, we don't know what we're doing. I had never worked in a commercial kitchen before baking.
I've seen bagels be made. It's not like a thing you think you can just make at home. It's a complicated process.
It is though. I mean, it's not and it is. I mean, you could make it. Look, you can make anything at home, right? If you have the patience and the wherewithal to do it, you can make anything at home. The really cool thing is we did our first kitchen bake in this commercial kitchen probably around November or December of 2020 until April of 2021. And we're talking about having had almost 100 dozen bagels made in a day. I didn't even use a mixer because my recipe was a hand-formed, hand-mixed. And I had high school kids working with me. This one guy, Jasper, who really was key to getting us going. And he wound up with a piece of the company too when we incorporated later that year. We were making this by hand. And I was worried that if I put a mixer in, it wouldn't be the same texture. Turns out it was the same texture and we saved a lot of energy. But we went on from that, cooking in that kitchen, to over the holidays of that year, when I was not able to cook there because they were too busy, I set up what I called the dozen dozen. And I went online with it and I marketed it. And I was going to sell a dozen bagels from my house every day between Christmas and New Year's. And it was like $20 a dozen. And I was selling $240 worth of bagels every day. And at the end of 2 weeks, that actually added up. I probably made a couple $1,000s over those 2 weeks. And I had a cottage license, so I was doing it legally. But the cool thing on that was, as you're building a business, there's got to be a little bit of hype, but you also have to have a great product. So we had the great product. And then the question was, well, how do we build the hype? So we built the hype by saying we only have a dozen for sale. And some days we actually sold 20 dozen, but some days we only sold like 2 or 3. It just depended on what our schedule was, what we were able to do. But we always said there's a dozen bagels for sale.
Well, and what I love about the way you started and built this business is you used one of my favorite marketing tricks, which is, marketing the concept of something before you had to invest your money in like the ingredients and all of that to make it. You were trying to get the pre-orders so that you weren't having to deal with waste and stuff. But you said,
Right.
even in the beginning, as you're figuring out pricing and stuff, you're losing money for a while in the beginning.
I wasn't losing money. I was giving money away. So
Good point.
I built this business. I was profitable. The day I started taking money, I was profitable. What happened was, when we went from that kitchen, and this is an interesting one, I then was told, listen, you got to get your own kitchen. We're a Mexican restaurant. We can't have bagel flour and seeds all over it. I said, fine. I went and I made a deal with someone because I didn't want to rent a space. And everyone in town is saying, oh, open a bagel store, open this. And had I done it, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, because I would have opened a bagel store and, that would have been it. But instead, I made a deal with a local plant-based kitchen that had a commissary, a great group of people. They had a commissary and they weren't using it on Saturdays. And they asked me for rent. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to pay rent because this is fun now. And 30, 40 people showed up. But how do I know they're going to show up tomorrow or the next day? And it wasn't a lack of confidence. It was for me, it was just smart business to not get in over your head. And I think a lot of young entrepreneurs and people early in businesses, they get in over their head before they realize that they can make a profit. So the deal I made was, I'm going to sell the bagels and I'll give you the cream cheese sale. And what that meant was, and at the time we had not sold any spreads. I said, look, my bagels are $24 a dozen. I'm going to let you sell 2 cream cheeses for $6 each, so that anyone that buys my bagels will buy your cream cheese. And it'll be $36, and that's the order. And I was like, last week I sold 50 dozen. I said, so if I sell another 50 dozen, you're going to get $600 in cream cheese sales, which to a small business is great. And that was amazing. 2.5 months into it, they were doing $6,000 in cream cheese sales on a weekend.
Okay, were they also making said cream cheese? Like, you weren't even involved in the cream cheese at that point.
I was not involved in the cream cheese other than the creation of the flavor concepts. They were making the cream cheese. They were buying the base. Almost all cream cheese that you get at a bagel shops or anywhere, you buy a great base and then you whip in your ingredients and you air it and you fluff it and you make it great. So they were buying a base and they were making some great cream cheeses. And it was also something that really got us going. The problem was, when we realized 2 months in, we're selling that much in bagels and cream cheese over a 2 or 3 day weekend, it means I'm paying $20,000 a month rent, because people were coming for the bagels and they were selling the cream cheese. And we had to renegotiate, because I'm like, look, I'm like, you're actually now making as much money as I am. And I'm moving stuff in and out of here every week. And I got to come back on Friday and then I got to take everything out on Sunday. It was a big undertaking, but I was profitable from every sale we made, because we never made product we didn't sell. But something really cool about that time was we were still making the dough every morning. And the bigger the orders got, the earlier you had to get in. So when we were 2 months into working in this hub kitchen, April or May of 2021, we were selling 200, 250 dozen bagels in a weekend. And I had to be in there making them with mixers. So we actually just kept buying new, larger mixers. And then we would come in, we would mix the dough. And not everything works all the time. So we sometimes would like have to remake the dough. And the real problem was it couldn't be like, hey, sorry, we're sold out, because we've already taken their money. So there were definitely days where we wasted flour or dough or ingredients because things just didn't work right. And major props and major kudos to all of the high school kids that worked with me for the beginning of this. I mean, it was wild. There were 7, 8, 9, 10 of them in the kitchen at any given time. And there's always music playing. And that's actually where our whole musical vibe in our stores came from. Was I remember people used to pull up to the kitchen and they would say like, wow, that's the best party in town. Because the door would be cracked, there'd be steam coming out of it. So it looks like there's a fog machine in there. And there's just party music playing at all times. And it's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning.
So fun.
Yeah.
So fun.
That's the origin.
I love it.
And then we grew up.
Okay.
And then we grew up and started signing leases.
Well, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that transition. I actually don't know the timeline. Did you get your first brick and mortar before or after you started working with all of your investors? Because you have a pretty cool investor story, right?
Yeah. So we have a cool run of investors. I raised the first money in September of 2021, knowing that I needed to get out of this temporary commissary kitchen I was in. Not that I didn't like them. It just wasn't a feasible. I look at everything in business as, is this scalable? Is this feasible? And how far can we go like this? And the one thing I knew was there's no way my life was going to continue waking up at 3 a.m. every day. I needed to make bagels and finding high school kids to come in and knead dough and roll bagels. It just wasn't realistic. So I knew I needed to find a commissary. I knew I needed to open our own location. So I raised a couple $100,000 from some local people, some strategic people. And within a couple months, we signed a lease in Reading, Connecticut, which is not really a highly populated town, but it's a beautiful part of Connecticut, about 15 minutes north of where I am. And we did that. And the intention there was to not only have our own storefront, but not really a storefront. Still, everything had to be ordered in advance. But what we learned there, how to make the dough without having to make it the morning of. So we were able to start making it a day or two before the bake, and we could keep it nice and cold. And then we could drive it to where we're baking it that night before or the morning of. And you didn't have all those issues of, is the mixer going to work today? So I hired a dough coach at that time with some of the money. And, he worked with me on, this guy, Michael, was amazing. And we worked on, what should the yeast structure be? We want to keep the same crust. How do we keep the crust without doing it? And we tried so many times. I mean, there were so many days where I thought I knew how to keep bagels overnight in a refrigerator. And I would come in the next morning and they would be completely overproofed or underproofed or sagging off the tray. I mean, the whole thing was an amazing learning process, obviously, but it took a lot. So we did that capital raise in September of 2021, opened our store in Reading. That allowed us to continue in Westport, where we had this shared kitchen, but rather than showing up there with flour, we replaced our mixers with refrigerators so that we could show up the day before with dough.
So smart.
And instead of needing 10 people in a morning, we needed 3 or 4.
So smart. But you had to go kind of seek that knowledge from an expert. I mean, it sounds like that was a really good idea of yours to invest some time and money in bringing someone in and not changing what you were doing, but teaching you how to do it in a professional, scalable way.
Correct. Because, I literally just got off the phone with someone who told me they have a great product in a different industry, and it's really amazing. and they want to raise money, but they don't know how to scale it. And I was like, well, before you raise too much money, find out if it's scalable. And we raised a couple $100,000, which in the grand scheme of raising capital is not a ton, but I still felt responsible to build a business. And in my view, worst case scenario was we had a great business that if we don't scale beyond this, we'll make our money back in a year and I'll be able to pay my investors back. But we did do that and it worked. And we now had 2 stores operating. And I almost want to say it was our proof of concept that I had 2 stores operating that allowed us to raise the next pool of capital, which was $2 million, just shy of a year later. And when we did that capital raise, we brought in a lot of Hollywood heavyweights and a lot of sports people and really smart business people. And it's important for me, at least, when we were raising money to make sure that the people we were aligning ourselves with had a big picture in mind and wanted this to be something that scaled. And not just for the money you make when you scale a business, but also for the love of let's bring this product to as many people as we can, because it's awesome product and people love it and we need to share it. So the part I skipped on that was before we did that large capital raise, I realized if we want to be in the right places, we need to meet the right people. And a lot of those people were in New York. Some of them were in Greenwich, Connecticut. Some of them were New Jersey. And a lot of them are also in the Hamptons. And I made it a point to make sure that every week we, quote, popped up in a different location so that we could spread what we're doing. And we didn't just remain a Westport local business. We spent the entire summer of 2021 driving out to Watermill between South and East Hampton, and we borrowed a kitchen in a Greek restaurant, which was a nightclub. And every once in a while, we'd show up at 4 a.m. and there'd still be people there from the night before. But again, we were pre-selling bagels. And the people you meet in Amagansett or in East Hampton or Watermill on a Saturday buying pre-sold bagels that are like the hottest thing to get and they were selling out, those are the people that then say, hey, you should meet my friend so-and-so, he's got a place here. Or you should meet this person, they raise money for these things. And it really worked out the way it was. I mean, one week we're cooking in East Hampton, the next week we're being set up in downtown Aspen for a big event that had a line around the block. And then the next thing you know, we're in Miami. And the next thing, someone wants us in LA and somebody wants us in New York. And that's how we actually wound up meeting some of the investors that came in on that second round.
That's the origin story of PopUp Bagels. But on Behind the Review, we love to bring a reviewer's voice in to share a bit of how these businesses are perceived by customers and the impact and effect their brand has on the firsthand experience. Next week, listen to our traditional Behind the Review episode featuring reviewer and customer of the PopUp Bagels New York City location, Amanda Retzer. And Adam will dig deeper into some of the operational decisions they made as the business evolved and expanded.
And that concludes our episode. I hope you enjoyed it and were able to take a thing or two away to implement in your own life. Whether it's a new idea that you can bring back to your business or a fresh perspective on how to be a positive influence as a consumer, we share these stories to inspire and create more meaningful connections in your local community.
Behind the review, dig deeper too. Behind the review, get all the news. Food, flowers, fixing, make business boom. Behind the review, dig deeper too.
This episode featured a conversation with Adam Goldberg, the owner of PopUp Bagels. To learn more about the story, head to yelp.com/behind the review and check out the guest details and episode takeaways. And don't forget to subscribe to the show so you get an alert each Thursday that we drop a new episode. To claim your own Yelp business page and start engaging with consumers, visit business.yelp.com. Our theme song is performed by Ali Schwartz and produced by Robbie G of Messerol Sound.